What is up, Canada? What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here. Sorry about that false start. I accidentally turned my microphone off. But anyways, in today's video, we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and some of the misinformation that's being spread around there. But before we get into some of the fake news that we'll touch upon at the end of this show, I'd love to hear from you guys. How careful are you about ensuring that the information you share in regards to the pandemic and COVID-19 is accurate? What reliable sources do you guys currently trust in regards to the news? As well as how often do you think that, maybe you shared something that wasn't accurate in regards to the pandemic as well? And, what do you think our responsibility is just as an average person, citizen, or social media user in regards to sharing information? Should we be more careful to make sure that we're not spreading fake news? Or, is it essentially, the situation that the facts are evolving so fast that, opinions change so quickly, and that even guidance from government and regulators makes it difficult to always know with 100% accuracy what's truth and what's fiction? I'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments, and also hear what sources do you trust for news. Let us know in that comment section, because I'm always curious to hear where you guys are going to get your news. And we're going to have a link to a lot of the government sources in the video description down below if you guys want to check them out. And again, we're not saying only rely on government sources, but we at least wanted to have a handy little reference for you guys if you want to go check out some government sources. So understand, this is touching so many different aspects of society at this point, whether we're thinking just physical relationships, medical, emotional, financial, social, political aspects of the virus. This literally, I don't think there's a facet of society that hasn't been touched at this point over the last year in regards to COVID-19. And again, I'd love to hear from you guys and hear your thoughts in regards to how your thoughts have evolved as well. Because again, there's so many rumors, so much fake news that we barely even get to talk about the fake news before the news cycle's moved on to a new headline at this point in time. I think it makes it really difficult for us to even really know what's truth and what's fiction. So unfortunately, not every message that goes out on social media is created equal, and not everyone has necessarily the same intentions behind the messages they're putting out as well. So understand, governments, media outlets, activist groups, social media influencers, comment sections and message boards, and just keyboard jockeys, we've all got our own perspectives. We've all got our own biases, and we've all got kind of our own sort of incentives in regards to spinning it our own unique way. So again, as a social media influencer, clickbait's a thing. If we can find a thumbnail or a title that gets more people to click on it, we're going to be tempted to do that simply because that's how the incentives work on social media, right? The more exposure, the more awareness, the more the opportunity is for us to grow our awareness. And eventually, if you're building a business off of social media, the goal is to capture that attention at some point, convert that into a business or customer relationship. So again, understand, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about social media outlets themselves, social media influencers, whether we're talking about the mainstream media outlets, activist groups, we've all got our own incentives and biases towards what's going on. And it's important that we always take that into consideration when we're looking at our sources of information. And also understand that there's real consequences when we share stuff on social media. So one, obviously you can end up with egg on your face, right? If you share something that turns out not to be true, but more so understand the impact that has. When you share something, other people may trust your opinion. And if you didn't carefully source out the source of the information you're sharing, well, there's a good chance they may take it as gospel. As well, the more of an influencer you have, it seems like more of a responsibility you have to society to make sure that you're putting out things that are accurate. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can only use government sources, but it does mean that I think we've got a certain duty if we want to at least make communication on the internet useful. Otherwise, deep fakes and fake news is just going to make it impossible for anyone to know what's true and what's fiction. So let's dive into a Stats Canada report that talks about the misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And there'll be a link in the video description down below to the survey as well. But, it's exploring how are Canadians engaged with and reacted to pandemic-related information. And before we get into the numbers, let's see how Stats Canada introduced its report overall. So this is a direct quote. The COVID-19 pandemic was accompanied, by an infodemic, an overabundance of information, some of which is true and some of which is not, which made it very difficult for people to find facts and reliable sources. Misinformation in the context of COVID-19 can endanger the population's health, especially if the news that spreads is about false preventative measures or treatments, or if it undermines the population's trust in health services in public or political institutions. Now, that last one I think is really important, because is it just in general, if it undermines the population's trust in health services, public or political institutions, or only if it does that based upon fake news? Because there is a difference here, right? Like, we can have an opinion and we can challenge whether they're making the right decisions while not necessarily, creating fake news, but we are in theory undermining the trust in these services, right? The same way that, understand, way back when originally the WHO said masks weren't important. And now it seems like some people are pushing for 2 masks or more masks. So again, understand that even our public institutions, their opinions are going to change based upon the facts and the information available to them. So again, it's just interesting, that last little sentence there, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions on this. But the report explains that 90% of Canadians polled used online sources to seek information about COVID-19. I'm actually, what the fuck were the other 10% of you doing? Are you actually just watching the news? That seems crazy to me. But let me know, the 10% that aren't using the internet to get information, where do you get information? Because you can't even just go to the coffee shop anymore. So 63% relied on online newspapers, 35% on social media posts by news organizations and magazines, and 30% on social media posts from other users and influencers. While that doesn't seem abnormal on the surface, what's wild is during the first few months of the pandemic, 96% of Canadians who used the internet to research the health crisis located information they believed to be misleading, false, or inaccurate. So at least it turns out that most of us are at least sometimes using a critical eye when looking at our sources, if essentially 96% of us definitely found some fake news there on the internet. And again, understand that what often happens is someone maybe puts forward a theory, and then someone grabs onto that theory and builds a narrative off of that. And then that narrative gets picked up. And all of a sudden we've got a snowball effect where one person put out a theoretical and now another person stating it as a fact. So we also suffer from this game of telephone, or broken telephone, as they call it. So going through the report a little bit further, out of that group, 25% saw such information more than once. So 25% of people said they saw fake news more than once on the internet. I'm not necessarily surprised. Again, I'm actually surprised that only 25% would see fake news more than once. But meanwhile, 14% saw it only once a day, and another 29% came across it just once a week. Only 4% of respondents said they never found any inaccurate information, while 28% believed they rarely did. That's fascinating to me. Again, obviously, these are just people's opinions. So again, you need to take it with a grain of salt, but I would love to hear your thoughts on these opinions. And understand, additionally, 40% of Canadians reported believing in certain COVID-19 related information, only later to determine it was untrue. I mean, that doesn't shock me, right? You could have heard the WHO tell you that masks weren't effective, and then later they tell you they are. Or again, even the government telling us a certain number of vaccines and later having to adjust that. Understand, facts are constantly shifting on the ground. So it is important that, while I don't think you can just blindly trust authorities, we also do need to give them a certain margin for error. And I'd love to hear whether you think that they're within their margin of error currently, or whether you think that they're well outside of their margin of error and you think there's been too many errors made up until this point. I'd love to hear. But what's very interesting here is about only 1 in 5 Canadians saying they always check the accuracy of online COVID-19 information. I mean, sometimes it's tough, right? Someone puts out a tweet, they put out an Instagram post. How can you necessarily verify that? And a lot of bloggers and a lot of pundits and a lot of just like hot takes on subject matter aren't necessarily going to be riddled with references either. So again, it's important to, when we do see that thing that like makes us feel good, rather than just immediately resharing it, let's take a beat, let's think about it, and really maybe try and dig a little bit deeper into it. I can remember, about 10 months ago, there was a lot of talk about 5G and COVID-19 and things of that nature. Again, sounded interesting. Quick Google though, and it was really difficult to find a lot of information backing it up. And now that we're about a year into the news cycle, it seems like that's essentially just dissipated, or at least I don't hear anyone going on about it anymore. So again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Were you originally on that train, and has your thoughts evolved, or have I actually just not been paying attention and this is still like a really big push from certain people? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and what you've encountered in the comment section. And moving on, here's a little bit more detailed look at how this all breaks down. So 21% always check the accuracy, 37% often check, 24% sometimes check, 12% rarely checked, and 6% never checked. So 53% of that group who never checked said they trusted the source of their information. And again, this is interesting, right? Like if you're reading the National Post or the Globe and Mail, how many people would actually go and check their sources? right? I believe most people would probably just assume that that information is accurate. And understand 22% didn't think about fact checking. So 22% of people never even considered the idea of going out and double checking some of the facts shared and the information that they encountered. And so let's move on to discussing a little bit more about sharing misinformation. Now, it's one thing to not know whether or something you've read or watched isn't factually correct. It's another to subsequently share it with others. So it's one thing for us to consume information that we're not sure about where it lands. It's another to share it. But the other thing that's really important too here is, I believe, the context of sharing. So are you saying this is interesting, or I'd like to further the discussion by sharing this, or are you sharing it with no context? Because I think when we share things without context, most people are going to default assume that you believe that's true and that you're essentially just parroting what that was said. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think if someone retweets blindly or reshares blindly that that's an automatic endorsement, or are they simply sharing that and leaving it up to the individual consumer to make that decision? And on the other side, 47% never shared unverified information, and Canadians aged 55 plus, 25% were most likely to always, often, or sometimes share COVID-19 information without validating its accuracy. You damn old people. So anyways, a person's education level had an impact on their habits as well. A person's level of education also had a lot to do with how information was disseminated. And the report explained this specifically. Canadians 15 years of age and over with a university degree were less likely than those with a high school diploma or less, or those with a non-university post-secondary diploma, to always, often, or sometimes share unverified information. So Canadians 15 years of age and over with a university degree were less likely. That was kind of a long sentence, so I just wanted to make sure you guys remembered where we started. So anyways, checking accuracy now, for those who chose to check the accuracy of COVID-19 information, 69% did so, consulting multiple sources. 53% of Canadians clicked through to read like a link that an article was based upon. 29% checked the date of the information they were reading. That's also really important because the facts are constantly changing, guys. So make sure that, when you are fact checking, you're also checking the date on that article, that report, or that piece of news, because things are evolving so much in regards to this. So then let's also move on to what other education potentially is needed. So a passage within the Misinformation during the COVID-19 pandemic report states how the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has identified 3 pillars in combating misinformation. So one is public institutions to have transparent strategic communications. That transparency is absolutely crucial in my opinion, because again, far too often, I think governments and regulators and public institutions don't fess up when facts have changed and they don't take ownership. I think if they were more clear and transparent with us, hey, you know what? A new study came out and we've changed our opinion based upon new facts. I think that it's easier for a lot of us to buy into that narrative than just all of a sudden the narrative changes with no real segue between it. Number 2 is online platforms to help limit the spread of false claims. So this is kind of what we've seen a lot of social media platforms step in with, essentially censorship. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I understand where the OECD is coming from. I don't like necessarily, though, the implications behind it or some of the unintended consequences that could spill out. And then finally, number 3 was future generations to receive better education to equip them with appropriate digital and media literacy skills. Now, I think that's important, but also understand when we leave education solely up to the domain of the government, we get the education we deserve. So I don't think that we can solely count upon the government to educate us. I think we each have a responsibility to take it upon ourselves to become better informed citizens in the hopes that we can help our country make better decisions and hopefully stop the spread of misinformation. So where do we go from here? It's tough to imagine the spread of pandemic-related misinformation slowing down anytime soon. And that cat's kind of out of the bag. Pandora is out of the box. So there will always be people online in the media or in public office who want to distort the facts in order for them to achieve a specific end game. I think it's really important that we try and understand the underlying motivations. For example, for me here, obviously one of my motivations is to get you to watch this. So I'm trying to provide valuable information, but we also try and create a little bit of intrigue or clickbait with our thumbnails, with our titles and things of that nature. And then the best we can hope for more Canadians acting responsibly when it comes to, ingesting information and sharing it with others. So again, I really do want you guys to consider this the next time you look at sharing a post. Have you checked their sources? Reminder, our sources are in the video link down below. I think that that's important, and we're trying to really be transparent with where we're grabbing our information. So we've got a ton of different links in the video description down below. A lot of these are government and not-for-profit organizations. Again, take the information with a grain of salt, if you will, but we just at least want to provide some resources for you in case you were looking to maybe, verify some facts with some government regulators or government websites. So anyways, that's it for the story, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and where you guys get your news, because again, I think that this news landscape is shifting dramatically. There's a lot of new opportunities, and we're trying to take advantage of it here by coming to you every day noon live, just sharing some of the interesting facts and stories that we've stumbled across. But I'd love to hear, where else do you get your facts and your information? As always, appreciate everyone that's interacting in that comment section. So I see a lot of the regulars there. We've got Ian Jack, we've got Aberrant Art, Time is Money. Appreciate you guys. Shabam, we've got James Bond as well. So really appreciate it, guys. And again, share with us your links to your sources and where you go to get information, because I'm always looking for great sources to find more intriguing and interesting stories, but I'd like to make sure that they're accurate as well. So again, really appreciate you guys interacting today. And until next time, remember, actually, that's my outro for my other show. So anyways, hope you guys are enjoying this. Reminder, these are an experiment show. So I do want your feedback. Every time you smash the like button, that's one more chance that we're going to continue to do this. Every time you share it on social media, it's one more chance that we're going to actually continue this project past next week. Because if you can believe it or not, we're 3 weeks through this 4-week experiment. So let me know your thoughts, your opinions in that comment section, whether you're watching this live or after the fact. I'll see you guys in a little bit because we've got another story. We're going to be talking more about GameStop